talk about doing it yourself. So, as I mentioned at the outset, the anchor to this talk is 10 must-have resources for any Hong Kong investment visa application. And of these 10 resources, 5 are resources that you absolutely have to use. And the other 5 are resources that I suggest that you refer to and absorb and learn by way of example, and use these resources to assist you in your application. But looking through the 5 must-use resources, the first is this one. It's the one-man investment visa for Hong Kong, what's required. Now, couched as a one-man investment visa. You can't get approved if you're a one-man investment visa, but 99% of all investment visas start out being one person. And this infographic basically just sets out from 39,000 feet all the moving parts to an investment visa application that you're going to have to address your mind to. The second resource is the visa information document. And this document basically puts more flesh on the skeleton that was availed through the initial infographic. And embedded in this resource are links to aspects of the Hong Kong Visa Handbook, which is the definitive guide that we wrote to the Hong Kong visa process, that talks in context or gives you access to resources in context about how to fill in the forms, for example, podcast examples of cases that would add value to your thinking about certain aspects of the application. So there are embedded links in this document that take you through to the next level of detail. One sort of step below the flesh on the skeleton, as it were. And then, once you've understood what the actual challenge of getting an investment visa is really all about, you need to start to prepare a plan for this. And so there's the Hong Kong visa application roadmap, which is available to you. Now, this document was actually developed on the back of a document that we use in our practice to brief amongst ourselves cases to my colleagues. Clearly, I don't do all the immigration cases myself. I think we're 14 people now in the practice. But I take all the instructions, I help devise the strategy, and we agree the strategy with the client. And then on the basis of those discussions and the client engaging us, I then turn around and I brief my colleagues who do all the heavy lifting. And in order to brief my colleagues, we have to follow a structured format so that every aspect of the application can be laid out so that their state of knowledge is exactly the same as mine, even though they haven't actually been involved in the initial client engagement meetings. So that's a document that we use internally. So we adjusted it slightly to reflect this that you can use, which is the application roadmap. And at the end of the exercise, if you fill in this application roadmap, you end up with a fully actionable application plan. And when you get this resource down free from the web, you receive an email every day for 4 days, because there are 4 sections to the application, and each of those 4 sections are accompanied by a short video presentation. It's about 10 minutes each, that teaches you everything that you need to know to complete the various sections of the application roadmap, resulting in, once it's fully completed after 4 or 5 days, a fully actionable plan for your application. So that's the third resource. The fourth resource is 3 particular sets of case examples that wouldn't get approved. And by understanding how these prior cases played out, you have an appreciation of what might work by way of example in your situation. And then finally, all the templates that you need to give effect to an application are detailed here in this section of the Hong Kong Visa Handbook. And this is the key one. It's called the Business Investment Visa Cover Letter. If you download it, you'll see it's actually a template with all the sections that you'll have to write up your argument in and tell your story in, all detailed by way of headings. So you take your application plan from the roadmap and sit down, and then you write your argument against that template. And then you end up with a complete bundle of information, because you write your argument and then you also set your addendum, and your addendum contains or reflects all the documents that you're submitting in support of the application. So those are the first key 5, and then these are the other 5. In fact, there are 6 on this page, including a short PowerPoint presentation from me. One's a video about a business plan. If you have a business plan, that's great. If you want to write a business plan but haven't written one yet, then there's a template there that you can use. Immigration Department, by the way, no more want to read a 60-page business plan than you want to write one. So if you think you need to write a business plan for the purposes of your application, I wouldn't worry about it. If you use these resources, the template cover letter and the application plan, the roadmap, will basically guide you through the process of telling the Immigration Department what they need to hear without needing to encapsulate it in a 60-page plan. Although, of course, having a business plan is always a good idea, just in terms of clarifying your own thinking. Short video on the topic that I mentioned earlier about the advantages if you're an existing resident, and then just some other resources that you'll find useful throughout the current of your application. And then finally, once you've gotten to a point where you think you're ready to submit your application, any questions you have, you're welcome to ask me them via the blog, and within 48 hours, I'll give you a podcast answer, completely free of charge. So that's it. Thanks for your engagement. Have you got any questions you'd like to ask me?
So I have a question about a slightly different situation. So put in a situation where the company being founded in Hong Kong is actually a wholly owned subsidiary of a company in another country.
Yeah.
Is that viewed upon more favorably by the Immigration Department? And then is the business investment visa still the appropriate one to sponsor to cover the director?
It all depends. It all depends on the caliber of the overseas entity.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a mere holding entity that was established just for the purposes of this visa, the Immigration Department, they'll call for all the evidence about the holding company.
That the holding
Yep.
company is actually in operation.
Yep. So
Okay.
audited financial statements, bank statements for the last 3 months. They want to make sure that there's a good, solid parent entity supporting this local entity.
Okay.
And then, if in this instance you can prove that the person that's applying for the visa to be sponsored by the wholly owned sub was an executive of the credible parent company, and even if he's the majority shareholder in the business, you can make an application for an employment visa for him on an intercompany transferee basis. And so that would be it wouldn't be an investment visa per se, it would be the employment visa based on a job offer because it's an intercompany transferee. But it's a new company situation. So when there's a new company situation, the Immigration Department always look to see that the 3 legs of the approvability stool are present. So they do the determination on the strength of special skills, knowledge and experience of value to not really available in Hong Kong, but the entity here, the sub, will still have to prove that it's a suitable and credible sponsor, which means that all the kind of requirements that are assessed and the investment visa are assessed here as well. It just instead of taking 4 to 6 months, it take about 2 months instead.
Okay, so basically, the Immigration Department is going to go through all the same series of checks and asking the same questions. Just I would submit a different type of paper.
Correct.
So I think it's like 990B.
Exactly. It's 999B instead of 999B.
Okay.
Got a question?
What to do with the Hong Kong ID when you leave Hong Kong for good? Can you give it a unique info? What to do when you decide to leave Hong Kong? Do you need to inform immigration that you are leaving? Do you need to leave your ID? Or?
Well, technically, you're supposed to notify the Immigration Department of any material change in circumstances within 30 days of that happening. That's technically. I've been doing this for 21 years. I've never met a single instance of an individual that has left and says, you know what I do? I'm packing up my apartment, I'm doing all the other things, so I really must write to the Immigration Department and let them know that I'm leaving. You're supposed to, but nobody seems to do that. And for your ID card, well, your identity card, as I mentioned earlier, serves 2 purposes. On the microchip, the Immigration Department embed your current immigration status and your current limit of stay, which allows you to exit through the smart channels at the airport, but it also serves as proof of identity. So if you cease being a resident, there's no requirement to return your identity card, and most people don't, and it will still form the purposes that it was designed for in terms of proof of identity. But if you leave Hong Kong with your ID card and then come back for a holiday 3 years later and you try and enter using your ID card, it won't let you do it because your immigration status doesn't allow you, isn't reflected in your chip.
But there are no any penalties if you go.
No.
How does the immigration service appreciate the business plan? Do they rely on external consultants or they know all about all businesses?
No, it's a great question. Dealing with immigration is always interesting, right? Because we get this wide array of clients, and we see gazillions of business plans. And we see all that stuff, right? And then we synthesize what's going on, and then we make recommendations and suggestions as to what might represent the best way of arguing your case to the immigration court. You put it into the immigration court, and you argue it that way, right? Now, I've been doing it for 21 years, and I've seen every permutation of every business plan that's ever existed in the history of the universe. There's nothing that surprises me anymore. But it begs the question, what do the immigration officers, who are ultimately government bureaucrats, they're not entrepreneurs, they've never had to make payroll, at the end of the month on credit card advances. They don't know what that stuff feels like. They've never had money at risk in what they do. But what's the psychology of the examining officers to, the business stories that come in? All I can say is that given the breadth of experience that we have, their breadth of experience must be significantly wider, right? Because we don't do all the investment visas that get approved in this town. The conversations that we have with immigration officers suggest that they're clued in. They are, in the main, I'd say, sensitive to the challenges faced by entrepreneurs. But sometimes they can get it wrong. And when they get it wrong, it's indicative of them not thinking properly about the business or understanding it properly. And that's okay because they're not living, eating and breathing this stuff, right? So they don't know it to the level that the entrepreneur applicant does. I'll give you an example. We had an application that was a great application. There was suitable business premises, several local jobs, great IP, money coming in. It was all going really, really good. But the immigration department balked on granting an approval initially because they looked at a document that says, well, okay, under this IP arrangement, you're going to have to make a payment of, say, $500,000 Hong Kong dollars 4 months from now when the 1 year anniversary comes up. And we're looking at the amount of cash that you've got in your bank account, okay? And we're not persuaded that you're solvent because you're going to have to make this payment, but we don't see the money here. But what they didn't appreciate is that they had so much stock that was out there. It was representative of all the accounts receivables. It represented several $1 million. They could only look at what they appeared to be readily available funds to meet this obligation, and they said, no, we have a problem with this. Now, we fixed it in the end, but we had to do a lot of work to educate the immigration department as to that reality, and that's an example of the immigration department not being commercial.
Is there anything to be careful about when filling in employment visa application? Anything tricky or to be particularly specifically?
No, just make sure that you can pass the approvability test. The person's is a professional, nobody local can do the job. Make sure that he's getting compensation that's broadly commensurate with market rates. Minimum $16,500 a month in salary. That's just the minimum. Yeah, my experience. Some cases get approved a little bit marginally lower than that, but you don't want to be bottom feeding, right? You want to be going with a robust application.
Do job just half of the amount? Could that be lower?
No,
then, or that's
no.
not good
It's you can't get an employment visa for part-time employment. It must be full-time.